Okay, so I'm going to do this video to show you some basic perspective drawing, and you can follow along and we can pause this as we go. It gives you the opportunity to have a look at it later on as well if you want. I'm not going to use loads of measurement today. We're going to estimate a little bit. You're going to need a ruler and you're going to need a sharp pencil, and ideally you might have a colouring pencil as well. Now what we're going to do is we're going to find the middle of this page, and we can do it by measurements. We could go from corner to corner using our ruler, and what that'll do is it will give us the same starting point. Okay, now I'm going to use a steel rule here, which isn't very useful for you, but I know that a page is about 300 mil. So if I go 150 and 150, and for anyone who's not sure what I mean by 150, that's 15 millimeters. That's going to be halfway left and right of my page, and on this side I'm going to come down 105 and 105, so that's 10.5 centimeters. Okay, now if you just want to do it 10 and 10, that's fine, it won't make much difference. So if I look at my page now, I'm going to just draw, I'm kind of estimating where that middle line is. I'm going to just draw a little line here, and then I'm going to get my ruler again here to find the middle of the page. Now, depending on what you're drawing, you might change where this point is, but for what I'm doing today, we're going to just have a vanishing point in the middle. Now, the vanishing point is called that because as things in perspective get further and further away, they actually appear to get smaller and smaller until eventually they disappear or they vanish. So that's why that's known as the vanishing point. Quite often we do the vanishing point above or below the object that we're drawing, but we're going to just keep it in the middle today to give us an interesting set of shapes. Now I'm going to do 4 shapes in each corner. Okay, 1 in each corner, and I'm going to start by drawing a square. Now what I tend to do with this to keep things quite quick is I might work out roughly where I want it to go by drawing lightly, and then go over it again with a ruler to make those lines nice and sharp. Now I'm drawing a little bit darker than maybe I would do sometimes to make sure that you can see it, and I don't want us to spend ages getting the perfect square, but proportionally I'd like you to get it about the same as I'm doing. Got a sticky bit on my ruler there. Now I'm actually not using a ruler, I'm using a steel rule, and it's got something stuck on the back of it, causing me problems. So there's a square. Now if you look at it, it's below the halfway point, and it's off to the left of this edge here. Okay, and I'm going to do a similar thing above, up here, so that you can see how something appears above a vanishing point and below. So now I've got one square drawn. I'm going to use similar sizes. This time I'm going to just take a step out of it okay. Now I know it's tempting to draw things with curves, and in reality the world's full of curvy shapes, but we're going to stick with 90 degrees and nice square shapes now. Now I'm not going to do anything else for a minute. I'm going to do a couple more shapes later on. So the idea is we take each of our corners wherever the shape changes direction, and we go to the vanishing point. So I'm going to use my ruler and I'm going to draw as lightly as possible up to the vanishing point. Now again, I'm going to draw a little bit darker than I would like you to do. I want you to do it so that you can only just see it. So if you look, I'm going to just get my pencil on the corner, I'm going to rotate my rule round until it comes to the vanishing point and be really precise, and then a nice sharp light line. Now that line's darker than I'd normally do. Do it as light as you can. Now onto the next corner, to that vanishing point, and then this corner to that vanishing point. Okay. So what we're now going to do, this is where it maybe gets a little bit trickier for people, is that we're looking at an object here which goes on forever. It's kind of what we might call infinite. It goes on forever and ever. So what we've got to do is we've got to chop that object off at a certain distance to shrink it down. So a line at the back edge of this is going to need to be parallel with the front edge of it. So parallel means two lines. I've just left a pause there in case anyone wants to ask a question. Two lines that will never meet. Those two lines are not parallel. These two lines are parallel. They're at the same angle. Now, it doesn't mean they've got to be vertical. You can have parallel lines which are horizontal. Doesn't really matter. So if that's my front edge, my back edge is going to be parallel with that. And you can just make a decision about how close or how far away. I'm going to go about there. And I'm going to get my pencil, put it on the front line. I'm going to get my rule and line it up parallel. And then I can pick my pencil up and draw that line in. Okay, so that's all good. That line and that line are parallel. So now, that's the front edge and that's the back edge. We've now got the front edge, so I need a back edge to that. So I'm going to get my pencil, line it up on the front edge, get my rule, find the corner, line it up, and draw that line in there. So now hopefully you can see that shape as a nice perspective 3D object, and I'm going to go over the lines that I want to make sure are the same, are the ones that I'm keeping, sorry. They're what I call keepers. Now that particularly makes it stand out if I've done really light lines in the first place. All right, try and be a little bit accurate. I got that wrong there. Be a little bit accurate to make sure that it looks good. Now we're going to do exactly the same process on this shape here, and we're going to go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 corners to the same vanishing point. You'll see that this one, it looks like we're looking down on it. When we do this one, we'll end up with the shape that we're looking up at. Okay, but the method's exactly the same. So from each corner, I'm going to go to my vanishing point. Okay. When you're self-checking this work, what you're doing is you're checking that you've been to each of those corners. The one that you'll forget will be this one. Okay, so do double check it. If we were doing a transparent object, something that's made of glass or something that's made of ice or something, you might also go to this corner as though you're seeing through the object. But we're doing just a solid at the moment, so we won't do that. So again, if you remember, we've got a front edge and a back edge which are parallel. We're going to do exactly the same thing here on this shape to make the front edge and back edge parallel. All right. Now you have to hold your nerve a little bit, particularly where you've got lines that are quite close to the horizontal line, because you've still got to be parallel. So look, there's our front edge there. I'm going to slide my rule down, and this is going to be our starting point, and I'm going to draw straight across. And now if you look, that edge goes vertical at this point, so this one's got to be vertical. So there's my front edge, that's where it's going to start. I slide it across. That's my back edge. Okay, again, where that one stops, this one starts, so we've got to do the same thing here. This one's going to come parallel with that. And then we've got a front edge, and we're going to do the back edge parallel here. So it's literally a matter of following the same process as we followed in the previous shape. and over time it gets more complex looking, but the method's exactly the same. Okay, now again you might want to spend a moment or two going over this, doing a bit of checking to make sure that your lines are all in the right place. Now I'm drawing dark to make sure that you can see it. Remember, if you draw as lightly as possible, it will save time later on. Instead of rubbing out, you can continue to use the same lines, and you can leave your projection lines or your construction lines in there as well. Draw nice and lightly. Right, now I'm going to do one more shape up in the top right hand corner now. I'm going to keep the same sort of proportions. So nice big squarey sort of shape. Okay, I'm not going to come too close to the middle here on this one. Look at where that goes. I can see that's not a very good square edge against the edge of my page there. And this time I'm going to do like a set of steps that are upside down. Now, if I was drawing a real shape, I'd probably measure this and make sure that all of these are exactly the same, but for this process it doesn't really matter. Alright, that'll do me. So again, remember how we've gone from corner to vanishing point? We're going to do the same here. This time we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 corners all going to that same point. I'm going to just whiz through those. I'm not going to talk you through them. Let's start on this one here. Double check that you go into your vanishing point. Don't forget these inside corners. Okay, if this video is a little bit glitchy, I've just had to reset my camera a bit, so that's why maybe there's a change. So what I was doing, I was going from each of these lines here, making sure that I'm getting to that vanishing point. So if you look at this now, you're kind of going, oh my goodness, that's looking really complicated. It's exactly the same process as before. What we're going to do is we're going to step down here and we're going to do those steps upside down, and it's only really when we get to these underneath ones that you're probably going to struggle a little bit. So all you're going to do is check that your line is parallel, front edge and your back edge is parallel. Okay, front edge is horizontal. There's our corner. We're going to do the same thing here on this one, making sure we run parallel. Another one here. So stepping down, front edge and back edge, always until we meet the next line. It's this line here. 2 more lines to go. Vertical one here. And then finally a horizontal one parallel with that. Okay, now again, I can see that shape really clearly, but you might want to just spend a moment darkening in your shapes. Okay, so nearly there now with darkening in these lines. Okay, now we're going to do one more shape at the bottom right hand corner. I normally leave that for students to do themselves, so I'm not going to do anything particularly to show you anything, but a shape that I would suggest that you do is probably still stick with this kind of corner bit here, but then maybe within this you might want to try some alternative shapes, probably still with straight lines. And then the next thing that you could try might be, if you're feeling brave, doing an internal line. I'm going to do this really quickly and then you can have a go yourselves if you get to it. Do straight lines, don't freehand it like I'm doing here. This is me being quick. Okay, so that's me doing a very quick version of a shape. you need to be a bit neater than that. So some of you might have spotted that the only line I actually need now to make this hollow would be my inside line going off to that vanishing point, which I'm going to do there. Okay, so try and come up with your own shape. Don't necessarily copy that one. That was just there to illustrate my point a little bit for you. Right, so that's potentially where you will leave it in your session. I'm actually just going to do a couple more little bits and bobs here to add colour. Now, just to talk about colour with you, I tend to work in 3 tones: light, medium and dark. In reality, there's loads more than that. If we look at a shape like this one, where we've got objects facing downwards are going to be the darkest. So if I put a little D here next to those two, they're the darkest. I'm then going to choose a second tone there, which is going to be medium, because they're facing that way to the right, and then this front one is probably going to be my lightest overall. Okay, so if that one's medium there, I'm going to do this one medium here. This one here is going to be straight up and down, so I'm going to do that light. Okay, now this one here I'm going to do somewhere in between, and then I'll make it up a little bit. Now, I tend to think of my light source as being up on the top left. Just wait for my camera to catch up, seems to be having a moment. So I imagine my light source to be top left, which means that it's shining this way. So you could get a little bit careful about where you put your shadows and highlights. I'm not going to bother myself at the moment. So I'm going to colour this in quite quickly. I would like you to make sure you take care over this, because this is probably a little bit scruffy if you were to do it as quick as I'm going to do it. I build my colours up by going over it the layer 2 or 3 times. So I don't try and go as dark as possible first time. I do things a couple of times, and like I said, I'm going a little bit quick. I want you to take a bit more care over this. Okay, so you can see that's all about the same colour. I tend to change my page so I can get to things. So don't be frightened of turning your books around or whatever to do this. And I'm building it up. I'm not trying to do it all in one hit, because that's where you get nasty lines that just look rubbish. Okay, but do try and stay in the lines and make sure you're not leaving any gaps. Okay, and now that I know where I'm going over that again and making them nice and dark. I've finished. I'm watching my video now. Boom, done. So you can see I've got a darker side to it, and what I'm now going to do is I'm going to do this bottom left hand shape. Oh, this is glitchy at the moment. Okay, so I'm going to do the bottom left hand shape, and again I'm going to just go over it a couple of times. I'm not going to do the top one on this, because that's probably going to be my lightest one. I try and go all the way across if I can, just because it gives me a better finish. Okay, so that's now slightly darker than that one, not quite as dark as that one, about the same as this one. I'm going to just do this face again. Just building up. Just building up those layers. Okay, as I say, I'm not going to do that top one particularly. I might just give it a really light coating. And same on this one, I'm going to do these sides darkest underneath, because they're pointing downwards. I'm going to make this face about the same as that one, so it's one light tone. I've done a basic bit of colour. Now the other thing that I would suggest that we do, I'm not going to do this bottom shape by the way, the other thing that I would suggest that we do is actually use a little bit of colour behind it to give it what we call shelf shadow, or to sort of lift it off the page. I'm not suggesting that we do a drop shadow, although that works quite nicely. Okay, so last little bit is just to add that colour, and hopefully you can see this. All I'm going to do is just around the outside of my shape add a contrasting colour, and that just helps it watching my camera not catching up, that just helps it to stand off the page. So that's the next bit. Now you need to choose a contrasting colour to make it look any good. Okay, so I'll put a screen grab when it's finished. The camera's obviously not working, so we'll do a screen grab when it's all done.